Ladies and gentlemen, it seems that Miss Boyle has a very bad case of laryngitis, but she has insisted upon introducing Mr. Baldwin anyway. Miss Boyle.
I hope, oh, it's wonderful. My voice has returned. The French have a very beautiful word expression for it, which is extinction de voix, which is much nicer than sort of the brutal medical term, laryngitis. I don't quite know why it should be necessary to introduce James Baldwin. But I do know that it's a very difficult thing to do. It is as difficult as if one tried to introduce another season, another element. Another season or another element that had certainly always been there, but which most people had failed to recognize or had turned their heads away from for a long time. Well, that season, that climate, that element, which are James Baldwin, they are suddenly now in the foreground of America's awareness. There is no way now, no way left, that anyone can fail to recognize them and to endure them and to contend with them. They can no longer be dismissed. It may even be that crops will have to be planted differently because of a new consideration of this season, or that quite new crops will have to be found which can grow in the new climate, and that all the old fences and the old defenses will be leveled by the fury of that new element, which is James Baldwin. He is speaking to you tonight on the novelist as playwright. His first play, Amen Corner, was produced at Howard University in 1955. A play version of his novel, Giovanni's Room, was performed by the Actors Studio in 1959. He is now working on a third play, Blues for Mr. Charlie, which will go into rehearsal at the Actors Studio in March. As for James Baldwin as novelist, there was first Go Tell It on the Mountain, a strong and lyrical book which prepared the way for the essays which followed, among them the great essay recently published by The New Yorker, entitled Letter from a Region in My Mind. Of this novel, Go Tell It on the Mountain, a critic wrote recently that it seemed to have come into existence within a vast area of freedom. This is true, I think, of all Baldwin's work. His second novel was Giovanni's Room. His third, published last year, Another Country. Between the novels, two collections of essays were published, Notes of a Native Son in 1955, and Nobody Knows My Name in 1961. The Letter from a Region in My Mind and Letter to My Nephew will appear in book form at the end of this month under the title, The Fire, Next Time. I have cried out, I have even shouted out when I didn't have my extinction de voix, and I have done this on many occasions to many people, that if anyone could bring to the contemporary short story the clarity of thought, the fervor of spirit, and the vigor of style which make Baldwin's essays such exciting reading, then we might see a true renaissance of the weary short story form. Just a week or so ago, it was pointed out in the pages of the New Republic that the Letter from a Region in My Mind appeared in print, flanked by some of the most extravagant and shocking advertising in America. Baldwin's words, such words, for instance, as these concerning the American Negro's past, a past, and I quote, of rope, fire, torture, castration, infanticide, rape, death and humiliation, fear by day and night, fear as deep as the marrow of the bone, doubt that he was worthy of life, since everyone around him denied it, sorrow for his women, for his kinfolk, for his children who needed his protection and whom he could not protect. Words such as these appeared in the New Yorker side by side with ads of an Empress chinchilla coat at $1,300 plus tax, and a diamond clip and bracelet for $18,500, tax included. In these terrifying comparisons, we are again made aware that Baldwin's prose, his voice, have established a spiritual climate which stands in real and vigorous opposition to the material climate of our country and our economy. We should rejoice, all of us, that this new and better climate, this fresher season is here. I am proud, very proud, that I've been asked to come here tonight simply to say, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. James Baldwin.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Can you hear me? When I first agreed months and months ago to do a lecture about the novelist as playwright, I had just begun the play, and so I knew all about it. Now I'm in the middle of it, and I know a good deal less than I did. But anyway, it was an interesting journey, and all we can talk about tonight, I'll talk for a while, and then I guess you'll ask me questions. I'll tell you what I discovered, or suspected, or speculated about during this panic. Now, the panic is a very old thing for any writer, and a very new thing, too. The panic begins when you realize that you are committed, not in a legal sense, not by contract. You have committed yourself, within yourself, to do something that you are not sure you can do. And then you talk about it, and you, at least I, drink a lot, wash socks, call up people. Suddenly discover thousands of things I have to do today. I must do them today. Because there it sits, that typewriter, in your office or your room, waiting. It's not going to go anywhere. You can move all over town. But the typewriter is stationary, like a prison cell, really, or like, I can't find a metaphor for it. It is a terror of every writer. In the beginning, I talked about the play and I thought that I was afraid of this. And I was, and I still am. When you look at the record of novelists who try to write plays, it's very discouraging. There are almost none. And furthermore, I could also see why. I'd written one play. I'd written two plays, really. I could see from the time I did the first play, I went down to Washington a week before we were opening at Harvard University. Because I wrote that play just to find out if I could write a play, and because I was, to tell you the truth, I had second novel jitters, and I knew I couldn't write a novel. I knew I had to write something. So I thought, I'll write a play, why not? It took about 2 years. And then they were doing it in Washington, and I went down to look at it. And I went there, sat in the auditorium, watching the actors, and I wanted to die. I suddenly realized that I had not written a play. I had tried to put a book on stage. Endless speeches. It went on and on and on and on. And I kept saying to myself, did I write that? And none of it worked. So I rewrote the entire thing on bourbon and fried chicken with Owen Dodson in about a week. And we put on a pretty good play. But a pretty good play, but I figured out something from that, which is what frightens me now. I suppose what I have to say is that I've written a couple of novels, and we're told that the novel has a form. No one knows what that form is. I mean, Ulysses is a novel, War and Peace is a novel, Don Quixote is a novel, and so we are told it's Peyton Place. Now, that meant as a novelist, what you have to do then is first of all divorce yourself from all the myths concerning the novel. How to write a novel. There is no way to write a novel that I've discovered. You simply have to, well, I guess I should tell it the way it happened. In my own case, working on a novel, you get bugged by one or two people. You don't know where they come from, quite. There they are one morning or one evening, in the middle of something else, like you're cooking a dinner or you're making love or you're walking along a street. I don't know how it happens, but suddenly a girl or a boy comes along and claims your attention somewhere in your mind. If it is the mind, we know very little about it, really. And then something begins to happen, which is a torment, which is almost inexpressible. It's a glory, too. It's not a complaint. There's a story, this girl has a story, and you got to tell that story. She's waiting for you to tell it. Now, how are you going to tell it? What is that story? Who is this girl? And why does she bug me? For example, before I finished Another Country, years and years and years ago, around the time of the flood, it seems to me, when it wasn't called Another Country, but called something else, and it was laid in Paris, this must be at least 10 years ago, a cat named Giovanni walked into the book, complete with his entire fate, on his way to the guillotine. But I hadn't planned for him. I didn't see him coming. He came into the book, took it over, wrecked the book. I took him out of it, naturally. And then no one in the book, and I mean this very seriously, though I'm not quite sure I can make you see what I mean. At the point I took Giovanni out of the book died. It was as though no one else in the book would speak to me until I did something about Giovanni. So I thought I would seal him off in a short story. And I tried. And it took more time than I want to tell you. And it was pointed out to me one day that no magazine will publish a short story of this size. But I had dealt finally with Giovanni. And it was after the fact, long, long after the fact, after Giovanni's room was out and I had been gone through what you go through when a book is out, and people say, poor boy. He was so talented, too. But you know, you did it because you had to do it, you know. And if you really are an artist, you know what you are doing, no matter who says what. Publishers, editors, friends, brothers, lovers. If Giovanni is there and he's got a story to be told and you have to tell it, then that's what you've got to do. And then, when that was over, I could begin again tearing up another country. And then I got sidetracked in the middle of another country when it was just about to work, I thought, into writing plays. I've always been attracted by the theater, for very good reasons which we will come to in a moment. I never admitted it, really, for very good reasons which, again, we will come to in a moment. I spent 18 months learning very sad things. Learning how to sail the way of electricians in the theater, learning in some way how the actual theater works, in the same sense that, if you want to give a performance, what you must do is not bump into the furniture, Just those things, learning about unions, learning about stars, learning about directors, discovering, if I can be so cruel, where the power was and what one could do. This sounds very brutal. This is the way it goes. In any given situation. I watched one writer, for example, with one director, and the director really wrecked what was never, in any case, a very good play. Didn't wreck it, really. Made it over. And the writer let him do it. I was there, and I watched it, and I saw. So another writer, another director, and the writer wouldn't let the director do that to him, and so I thought, aha. I know the contract says that you have, that your approval should not be unreasonably withheld. But I finally figured out what that meant. It meant you have exactly as much power as you're willing to take. That if you write it, if you really work at it, it's like being a novelist. It's like dealing with publisher's row. I suppose my publisher's in this house. But what it comes to, finally, is that I have this thing. I have this book, this glass, this table, this house. I can do this. This is what I've done. And he says, well, there's no market for it. And it's true, there is no market for it. No one ever asked you to become a writer. But still, I have this thing. And ultimately, you the publisher, you the director, you the actor, you the theater. If there is not a writer somewhere around, you will sooner or later go out of business. Sooner or later, you'll be forced to depend on people who can write, because that is it. The play is still the thing. No one has ever read Forever Amber again. It made a lot of money whenever it came out. No one has ever thought of it again. No one ever will. And no publisher can survive, I understood this when I was very young, on bestsellers. He has to have Thomas Mann someplace, textbooks, things to keep him in the business, keep him going on the years when there are no bestsellers. Now, of course, I was in the same position, except I had no money. And I had to keep in business, too. I have this table, you have to buy it sooner or later, and I understood that if I chop off this leg and, and do all kinds of, if I make it fashionable, it will not only ruin my table, it will ultimately ruin your business. So then you hang out, you hold out. This is not heroic. This is simply a matter of, knowing in some way, if you're a Harlem boy, and I am, if you know those streets, knowing how, somewhere to survive. Let's just say, call their bluff. I discovered about business, for example, dealing with my agents, not my present agent, but the horrible time I spent. No, I mean that. I mean that. But I spent a long time at another agency, and I discovered they didn't know anything about their business, really. Artists are always supposed to be mad and impractical and spending too much money and all that jazz, But they didn't know what they were doing either. It was a great revelation. So, when I understood that, and I understood I've eaten a lot of peanuts and I need peanuts again, I slept in subways and I can do it again. I don't need $3,000, because if I take your $3,000 on those terms, I'll need $3,000 next week on your terms, and that's the end of me. $3,000 is about worth a nickel, you know, when you get through the taxes, the lawyers, the friends, and if you drink as much as I do. Okay. Now, in the case of a novel, I discovered this much when I was writing Go Tell It on the Mountain, which took me a long, long time, and there's no point in going into that. But I discovered one thing, something which James had said years and years ago, and for a while I had this on the wall above my desk for many, many years, and I still have it in my head. James said, "What is stated is not represented. What is not represented is not vivid. And what is not vivid is not art." And I've written, you know, by the time I've written Go Tell It on the Mountain, that is to say, by the time I've gotten around to trying it again, I've written several preachy novels. I was telling you what I thought. And somebody said to me one day, "We know you can write, baby, you know. Get that writer out of there and tell the story." And that's what it's all about. The last time I wrote Go Tell It on the Mountain, I was in Paris, I was broke, and I'd torn it up, and no one who is not a novelist can really quite perhaps get what I mean, because it bugs you. You've got to do this thing, and you can't do it. And you try this, and you try that, and it doesn't work. It will not move, it will not move, it will not move. And years passed this way. So I torn it up for the last time, and I said, I'm going to write another novel, I forget it. But I knew I couldn't. I knew I had to do that novel if I were ever going to write a novel at all. And this sounds very corny, but I had a kind of revelation lying across my cot in the Rue Jacob, having decided I cannot go on, I cannot write. Something clicked in my head suddenly. Something said, I guess it was I who said, make it happen on his birthday. If you make it happen in one day, you can do everything else. You can control it. And you're released from 1,000 other tales. If you center it on the little boy, you can manage to do the book. And so, that was what I did. And it was true. Suddenly, what I discovered in that moment was a difficult thing to say. The moment I realized if I did it on the boy's birthday, I could make it work, I also realized why it hadn't worked so long. And why it hadn't worked had nothing to do with whether or not I could write. It had to do with something I couldn't face. It had to do with where I come from and what I felt about it, and in some way still feel about it. It had to do, to be brutal about it, with the fact that I was born in Harlem and that I'd always thought of myself as a nigger. Now, in order for me to write that book, I had to go back there before I learned how to wear Ivy League suits and drink scotch and smoke cigarettes and, you know, all those things. Go back to where I was. Who are you really? Who are you really? That's a terrible question you always face. I thought I'd face it in Mountain forever. But I have discovered since two terrible things. One is that the discipline of being a writer, as E.M. Forster said, you're going to write a novel, well, yes, you have to tell a story. No one cares, and no one should care, how I suffered when I grew up, you know. And I'm as sensitive as they come, you know, but nobody cares about that either, and they shouldn't. You want to claim people's attention? Do what Henry James demands of the novelist, you know, entertain the reader, which is not the same thing as being Mickey Spillane. Make a real situation, or as Ralph Ellison said, achieve a real agony. Trap the reader in it. Now, in order to do that, you've got to make a confession about yourself. And the terrifying thing about it is you think you made the confession on Tuesday and you think it's over. You wish it were. But no, not at all. Not at all. On Wednesday, because you made the confession on Tuesday, another aspect of something you've been hiding bobs into the mind. And it all focuses around that dreadful typewriter. And then you do, again, what I've been doing for months, you know. You take trips. And I got all kinds of excuses. I can make lectures. you know. There are thousands of, literal, real things to do. But I know. You don't know. My brother doesn't know, my mother doesn't know, but I know. I know, for example, when I'm drinking too much, not because I'm drinking more than usual, but because I know why. I know when I'm trying to run. I have to know it by now. And therefore, as it turned out, my fear of writing a play was not really a fear of writing a play. It was the same old fear of writing anything. Now, I understood this. This is not hard to understand. That if I were going to do, let us say, the conversion scene from Go Tell It on the Mountain, or any scene, whatever, anything, that if I were going to do it for an audience, that had to be done, like up. There they are, they're sitting there, and really them in the corner, I realized if I cut this actor's speech and just made it across the stage and touched somebody, the speech wasn't necessary. It was all carried by, because people are looking at it. They're not reading it, they're looking at it, and they're hearing it. So you have to write it that way. You have to play it at once. It's very difficult, again, to say, up and down. People never in life talk the way they talk in novels, and never talk in life the way they talk on stage. The terrifying thing about writing dialogue in a novel is that you somehow have to create an ambiance, an atmosphere, which will make the reader believe that these two people, these three people, these four people would say this. Because what people must do in novels is say what they mean. Somehow the reader's got to know what this inarticulate person means. Now you've got to somehow make this inarticulate person say things that he would say in life if he could. And if he could say that, this is the way he would say it. Most people never speak, really. And there's a very good reason for that. When somebody dies, there's not much you can say. You don't say anything. Somebody you love dies, there is no language for that. You fall in love, you're at the mercy of 3 words. This is why poets, this is why writers are important. Shakespeare's written a whole series of sonnets about what it means to fall in love. And without those sonnets, this may sound very mystical, but without those sonnets, we would know what it's like to fall in love. The effort then of any body dealing in language is to try to excavate, to dig up from the bottom of the sea what it is like to be alive, what it really feels like to be a New York taxi driver. He can't tell you, what it really feels like to be a Harlem mother, what it really feels like to be James Meredith. And none of these people, what it really feels like to be James Baldwin, I can't tell you that either. And yet somebody must, because what is happening to the taxi driver, the Harlem mother, Mr. Meredith, myself, is happening to all of us. To all of us. And happening to us all of the time. And we perish in a kind of loneliness because we cannot speak. And the role or the doom or the glory, really, of any literary artist, any artist at all, is to make you see who you are. And the penalty that the artist has to pay for this is look very closely into his own mirror and tell the truth about himself. I used to think, because I wanted to believe it, that I looked like a football player. And I walked around town that way. You can imagine the kind of trouble I got into. Or, I've always dreamed of being, restrained, cool, calm, one of those people who, like someone said, Mo, I'm gonna write from 9 to 5 every day, That's it. And I've also put myself on that way, you know. I'm a writer. But it ain't me. I don't write from 9 to 5 every day. And in fact, you know, whole days, weeks go by. When I walk in the office, look at the typewriter, sort of dust it and walk out. Well, that's me, you know. That's me. And I guess I'll never change. The trick is somehow to be able to accept that. And the trouble is that you're always trying to and never quite managing it. I saw myself on TV the first time once, and I know that you know I have big eyes. But I didn't know it. But it's this terrible shock. No. And I mean this seriously. I mean, it's funny, but it ain't. No. This terrible shock of looking at yourself, looking at yourself, and looking at yourself, and looking at yourself, which most people must avoid. Must avoid. This is why. This is really why. They kill their artists off. I don't mean Americans only kill their artists off. Everybody has, since we've ever heard of artists. Kill them off, and then build statues to them. No. Once they are safely dead, then they can be honored. Now, this is not, by the way, a complaint, because any artist in his right mind, you know, knows what he's in for and waits for the statue, you know, and hopes to deserve it. But the point is that what one is always trying to do is hold a mirror up, hold a mirror up. My anguish, which seemed to me when I was 16 to be absolutely special, unprecedented, never having happened in the history of the world before, I discovered when I was about 10 years older, was very, very common. Lots of people have been born poor, small, confused, you know. Lots of people masturbated, you know. But when you're 16, you think this is the first time it ever happened since the sun rose. And most of us, and now I mean especially here, go through our entire lives with that fantasy. It is very hard to make this connection that if you can have your heart broken, if your heart can break, then her heart can break too. It is very hard to make this effort when your heart breaks to use that to understand somebody else's heartbreak. Racially speaking, because we can't avoid it, it's very hard for most white people in this country to realize the Negro children are children too. I never understood, I'll probably go to my grave without understanding, how women with children in their arms can spit on other children. I just don't get it. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing, not to the children they're spitting on, but to themselves and to the children in their arms. We're in great trouble here, which brings me back to where I started about this play. The play has always depended, the play has always had one center. In the same way another country always had Ida. Other people came and went, but she was always there. The play has always had in it, at the center of it, a Negro boy who dies, who is killed. And of course, the discovery, I suppose, that I made in the last few months is a very corny discovery. I should have known it long before, and I did. But you keep discovering it all over again. Is that you're always writing one story, really. That's what's so terrible. And even in a way humiliating. You're always trying to close with one thing, to get your story out. This is what is meant by an artist's limitations. I only have one story really to tell, and I haven't told it yet. And I know that. This boy in the deep south dies. This sets in motion a whole lot of other things, as it turned out for me. I suddenly realized this boy that I'm trying to deal with here has been coming for a long, long time. I can trace him back as far as Teleport on the Mountain in the person of the son, Royal, who was killed in Chicago, the father's first illegitimate son. And he's again in Sonny's Blues, and he's Rufus in another country. And I've never really dealt with him. Now, why haven't I dealt with him? One terrible thing for me about trying to work and leaving aside all the terrible hassles of working in the commercial theater at all, I want to talk about that, is in a much more naked way than a novel is. A play has to be a confession. And I say more naked, because there's some things in a novel that I'm all those people in another country. I'm all of them. And most of the man who wrote the book, which changes the equation again. I'm also all those people in the play I'm trying to do, but what I had to face was I'm principally the boy. There's some buried thing. I've known so many of them, all the years that I was growing up. I've seen so many people perish on the streets where I come from. And I know why they perished. I know exactly what happened to them. And it's a story which I have never, in the very deepest part of myself, tried to deal with as hard as I suddenly realized I must deal with it now. There's a terrible story, a terrible and beautiful story, behind the face of a man like Floyd Patterson. It is a record of a crime. The tragedy in this country now, and I think it is a tragedy, is not that a crime has been committed or is being committed all of the time and all around us. The tragedy is deeper than that. Crime is common. The tragedy is that we pretend it didn't happen. And that is a turn of the screw. It means, in effect, that white people in America are yet more endangered, and much more profoundly so, than black men are. It may sound very difficult to say it this way, yet I think you ought to think about it. It's the story of my play, it's my story. Our people has done something very dangerous when it creates someone who can say, what are you going to do to me now? What can you do to me now? You've done it all. Now, what are you going to do? When I was in Mississippi, because life is like this, you know. I'm writing a play about a murder, and as it turned out, in Mississippi, while I was there, or shortly before I got there was a murder. So I was running around town with some other people, not around town, but around the countryside, trying to find witnesses to it. Everyone knew who did it. And I was fascinated, obsessed even, by the faces of the people in the cars, the people on the roads. I mean the sheriffs, I mean the workers. Now, why was I fascinated by it? I was fascinated because I've been trying in my play, for one thing, to understand what a murderer is like. How do you get to be a murderer? Something has to happen in you. You must have said yes to something and no to something else in order for that to happen. Because we all wanted to kill somebody. I have, God knows, many, 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 many times. And yet, to arrive at the point of panic in which you actually commit a murder is something else. And if it's a white man, in my case, you know, writing this play. If it's a white man killing a Negro boy, then of course I've opened the Pandora's box of my own, and I got to find out some way of making this person a human being. Because it wouldn't be important if he was special, if he were not a human being. What is important is that he must have suffered terribly to be forced to do this. And in those places in the Deep South, and in these places in New York, you can see something which you don't quite want to face. I don't quite want to face. You can't quite imagine how people got so shriveled. What happened? Why does he trust himself so little that he thinks it's safer for him if I am dead? How do people make such a journey? How did we get here? It's a frightening speculation. You look, I look at white men in Mississippi, and I wonder, don't tell Barnett I said this, I wonder what about their wives. If this cat is where he is, what on earth is happening to her? No, I mean this. I mean this. It has nothing to do anymore with what we call the Negro problem. No. It has to do with something about this country, what happened here. And as far as I can tell, on the basis of the evidence so far in, what really happened here must have been so terrible that no one wants to talk about it, because nobody does. In Mississippi again, running around with Mr. Meredith, there's a wild obligato of television programs, by Pillsbury Flower and the hair things and skin creams and brassieres. And those soap operas they have on TV in the morning, The Secret Storm, The Inner Life, I don't know, all this fantastic reality in this town. What America was really like was in Jackson. And what America really wants to believe was on that screen. Pillsbury Flower makes lighter cake. You wear this brassiere, baby, you can have Harry Belafonte. I am not trying to be flippant. It frightens me. It frightens me. It ought to frighten you, too. My play is about a boy who died, as I said. It's called Blues to Mr. Charlie, because some of you know who Mr. Charlie is. And those of you who don't know who Mr. Charlie is, I'll tell. Mr. Charlie is what Negroes have called white men for years and years and years. When Mr. Charlie was like here, and I'm shining his shoes, and my brother is shining somebody else's shoes there. And I don't like this cat I'm shining the shoes on. And I said to my brother, dig Mr. Charlie, baby. He doesn't know what I'm talking about. No. And he still doesn't. And it is time to find out. Thank you. We are supposed to go engage in a kind of dialogue. You'd ask me questions and I'll answer them if I can. I beg your pardon? Go on. That doesn't help. Go on. I think you have a point. I don't think it would help you to become a Negro Jew. But I know what you mean, on the other hand, when you say that you feel that I'm exploiting you and that you feel guilty. I don't want you to feel guilty. I don't want you to feel guilty because that's too easy. What I want you to do, and I am exploiting you, you know, if you want to put it that way. I'm pushing you. I'm doing all those things. I'm kicking you, if you want to put it that way. But you make one mistake. I'm not doing it because I'm black, you know, I'm not talking about color. I'm talking about you. Now, we can all go, you know, through the rest of this century, what's left of it, you feeling guilty as a white man, and my being bitter as a black man. And this will be the end of both of us. What you have to do, according to me, is recognize a very simple fact. I know you didn't rape my grandmother, you know. I know you never had a plantation, you know. But on the other hand, I didn't do it either. No, I pay for it. 20 million people in this country pay for their history, which is in their skin. And if this is so, then I have the right, since it's our country, yours and mine. I can't forever be expected to believe that, you know, I meet you, I meet, you know, whoever I meet, and they say, don't blame me, I didn't do it. I didn't do it. Then who did it? You can't be as innocent as you are if at the same time, you know, you're being so innocent, you have 20 million people in captivity in your country. It's your country too. I don't want your guilt. I want you to find out what happened. How did it happen? You think it's happening to me. It isn't happening to me. It's happening to you. It's being done in your name. You let it happen. You don't stop it. And I think that's wrong. Negro, Jew, Italian, Turk, Greek, whatever, I don't care. We are here together. You cannot endlessly tell me, I'm sorry I didn't do it. You must at some point begin to look at what happened and begin to change it. Because it did happen. Yes. Would you expand on that a little? Stand up, I can't hear you.
Would you kindly comment on responsibility on the other side?
Responsibility is indeed a two-way street. I think what you probably have in mind when you say it, all those statistics about syphilis, illegitimacy, illiteracy, razor toting, watermelon, pork chops, you know, before you can say, the way you say it, the responsibility is a two-way street, you must consider this. You must ask yourself this. Don't ask yourself now and don't, no, there's nothing to do with whatever to do with me. It's up to you. You must ask yourself precisely why I should imitate you. You must ask yourself precisely the difference between life in Scarsdale and life in Harlem. I don't want to get to be like you. I'm sorry.
Mr. Baldwin, would you explain more fully your conversation with Elijah
Elijah Muhammad. He asked me if I would report more fully on my conversation with Elijah Muhammad in Chicago. Well, I really can't, for many reasons. I mean, the essence of it is what I tried to say, you know, and the rest would be kind of frivolous detail. It's not Elijah, I'm sorry, that I'm concerned about in any case. It's the movement and what the movement means. Yes?
What effect do you think that your very powerful works have, and the works of other people, other writers, very much concerned with the social scene, have on the social life in general of the country? How effective do you think it is, your works as well as other ones?
As far as I can tell, the work of any writer has very little visible effect. The only barometer I have is the mail I get. And some days that's very hopeful. And some days it is not. What it comes to is that nobody really, including me, really wants to think, really wants to change. Most people think that they have this house, this car, whatever it is they think they have is what they're holding on to. And they don't understand that as long as you hold on to it, you haven't got it. Now that sounds paradoxical. People in America don't own cars, for example. Cars own them. Yes? I beg your pardon, I can't hear you.
I thought this is where you came closest to your story, forgetting the didactic house. And in the scene, you describe the father. I was thinking this father-son relationship is closer to the crime in America than any white Negro.
Don't you see that they're related? Oh, the question, I'm sorry. If I... Beg pardon? Well, what the man is asking me is an effect, if I understood your question. He mentions Giovanni's Room and the relationship between the hero David and his father, which is sketched in the book. And so a grisly relationship, and he wants to know if that isn't closer to the real crime than the white Negro thing is in America. And all I can say about that is that they are related. One of the reasons Americans are so innocent or cling to their innocence so hard, I'm convinced that one of the reasons for that is my presence in our country. My presence in your country, that's the way it really goes down. I mean, this is what you really believe. Now, in order to avoid, let us say, me, you've had to go all the way, and I think about this seriously, you've had to go all the way to Eisenhower, who was not a man in any other country. Only America could produce a boy like that and elect him twice. As for the father-son crime specifically, one of the sons or one of the fathers will have to write it. I'm waiting for it. Yes.
Could you give us your opinion, your reason, what you think the reason for and the result of will be of the recent wave of humor concerning the segregation drama?
You think it's recent. I guess you heard the question. No, I couldn't guess. Americans think that they talk about it or are able to laugh at it, that it's over. I adore Dick Gregory. No, I think he likes me too. Doesn't change Harlem, doesn't change Mississippi, doesn't change the South Side, and doesn't help Meredith get through his classes at Ole Miss. You know. Yes. Well, we don't read the same national magazines. I don't believe in stabilizing or whatever it's called, the arts. You know, I tell you the truth, I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, as far as I know, I've never let my name to any such. Oh, you're talking about the President's magazine, the President's book. Well, I don't know what to say about that. You know, I haven't seen the book. They asked me to do an article for them, and I did it. It doesn't mean that I spent all my time in the swimming pool with the Kennedys. At all. At all. I don't mean to be flippant. I beg your pardon? Well, looking at it in the most sanguine way, you know, the most optimistic way, it would be a great improvement in American life if they realized that artists were real. You know, if there was such a thing as an artist, which we don't yet know. You know, and I think that might be, you know, it may be a great thing when a cat can say, you know, like to his mother, I'm going to be a writer, and she doesn't say, go out and get a job. You know, when we realize that this is a real thing. But otherwise, I really don't know. You know, I have to beg that question because I could also say that from the power point of view, certain artists can be very useful. Politicians never cared about artists. Check with Socrates if you doubt me.
One more question.
Yeah. Yes. That's a great question to end the evening with. There are too many things to say at once. I mean, for example, you know, that how can I put it? Speaking only for Jimmy Baldwin, you know, I loved it. I want to go back. Speaking from another point of view, at least, you know, from my point of view again, it's very troublesome, very frightening in another way, because Europe has not really left Africa yet, and really will not leave until it's forced to. There's several thousand ways of becoming independent. The countries I visited were mainly very poor, which is a very important thing, largely illiterate. There's a vast amount of work to be done. Now, I happen to myself feel, though I have absolutely no evidence for this, I couldn't prove it to you, that they will somehow do it. And the reason I really feel that way is because no one else is going to, really. The people who might conceivably, you know, invest enough capital in any given country to get the railroad to the mine, to get the iron ore out of the mines, usually, and this includes us, of course, invested with so many cables, there's so many strings attached, that in effect, it could become a new kind of colonialism. And the only thing, as far as I can tell, which can resist that is the will and the strength and the courage of the people. which is where my money is in any case. As for the American Negro in relationship to Africa, it is very important to recognize that the American Negro is no longer an African. It's very important for American Negroes to recognize this too. And the effect that Africa can have, for example, let us say then on me, and the effect in fact it did have, was to give me another sense of myself, a sense which exists independent of Greer Garson and Tom Mix and Andy Hardy, a sense that for generations, for thousands and thousands of years, before anyone in this room was born, there are black people around who were not niggers, who were themselves, and who, by the way, still are, who have another sense of the world entirely, who never had to do some things I've had to do, or get over some things I had to get over. There's something very beautiful about that for me, and very valuable, I think, for all American Negroes, on condition that one recognizes one cannot go back to Africa. You can go there. You can't go back anywhere. And it might be very interesting for the country, too. I'll leave you with a very reckless speculation, and make of it what you will. I don't think this country can be saved unless the Negro does it. Good night.